Okay, so you should be able to hear me now. Hi, everybody. It's Joe Cioffi on this Sunday morning. Let me just turn the screen just a little bit here. I decided that since the weather was nice on this Sunday morning, I'm outside here with my morning coffee, my late morning coffee, and my morning cigar, and we're going to take a look at the solar eclipse, which is a week from tomorrow, and the probability of clouds based on climatology, and also what the GFS model is indicating. And we're going to take a look at the tropics, which we have our tropical depression that's east of the Bahamas, moving north-northwest, that will probably become a tropical storm later today, but it's not a threat to the East Coast. But the overnight weather models, including the European, by the way, show the activity in the tropics picking up a little bit. So I'm going to set it up here, and while it's running, we'll chat. And then when we come back, when it's done, we will come back and chat some more. By the way, for you cigar aficionados, this is a Flor Dominica 700 Maduro, and it's very good. It's my go-to cigar. So just give me 1 second. Hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi on this Sunday, and we're going to take a look at the tropics, and we're going to look at the eclipse because we are now closing in on 7 days and counting. And here is the path of totality. You can access this website, by the way, by going to weather.gov, and there will be a link there, and I will put a link up on the chat, much like I did yesterday, in case you missed it. Now, this is the path of totality, so I just want to give you an idea. When you zoom in, and I'm zooming in over the state of Missouri, you can see how narrow it is. I mean, it's every bit of 80 miles or so on either side. So St. Louis, for example, is just a tick outside of the path of totality, while St. Joseph, Missouri, is right square in it. In the east, you have it going pretty much just north of Charleston, over Myrtle Beach, and south of Myrtle Beach. So right there along the coast, Myrtle Beach is just out of it. Wilmington is out of it, but Charleston is in it. So is Columbia, South Carolina. And when we move on to the north and west, you can see it goes through Greenville, but not through Spartanburg in Tennessee, through North Carolina now into Tennessee, where we see it actually going just Nashville is in it, so is Bowling Green, and so on. So you can actually just play with this map and figure out where you are with respect to all of this. And of course, here in the New York area, it's at about 75% that we're going to see here. But the big question with all this is clouds, because certainly you could be there waiting for that experience to occur, and if there are clouds, or even one cloud happens to move over the sun, you got a problem. And when we look at climatology, the best chances for clear skies are basically west of the Mississippi to the west coast, except for the northwest and perhaps for coastal areas of California, because of the fact that there's morning low clouds there usually, and they may not burn off. East of the Mississippi, the probability of clear skies decreases. It's hard to imagine a day in August where there are not at least some clouds running around, because usually this time of year we've got some sort of Bermuda high or tropical air mass in the mix, and that becomes problematic. Now, if we look at the GFS from overnight, it kind of plays out this way in terms of climatology. Notice we've got a southerly flow coming up from Texas on up into the western Great Lakes. So I would suspect, everywhere from just west of the Mississippi River to the East Coast will have at least some clouds. And you can also see there's some measurable rainfall that's indicated, so there'll be a smattering of showers. But go west from there into the plains, and into the southwest, other than some diurnal, and monsoonal showers that seem to be popping up in parts of the southwest. I think this area will stand to climate, and much of that area will have clear skies. But then you notice the Pacific Northwest has some kind of system coming in, and that'll be problematic there. This is going to, of course, change somewhat from day to day. And in terms of specifics, I would suggest that you go check the local National Weather Service office for any particular area, whether it's where you live or perhaps where you are planning to travel. And by the way, this is the GFS's latest fantasy hurricane that it has east of the Bahamas by a week from Monday. So we're going to address this. You kind of know my view on these things already, so we will explore that in just a second. First off, let's look at Tropical Depression 8, which developed last night. And you can see it's kind of moving north-northwestward. Most of the thunderstorm activity is actually on the east and south side. If you look where the spinning is, the circulation center is here. There really isn't too much going on north and northwest of the center. It's mostly to the east and to the south. But it has a decent enough looking cloud structure, so I would not be at all surprised if this strengthens to a tropical storm later today. It's in a low wind shear environment. It is also over very warm water. The only issue is that there is dry air around, so that is probably going to impede development somewhat. It'll slow it down, but I don't think it'll stop it. The bottom line is that it's going to turn north and northeast and out to sea. And if you look off the east coast, the cold front that went through yesterday, these clouds are basically moving southwest and northeast. So the flow is already set in terms of where it is going. And when we look at the hurricane model track guidance from overnight, it runs north-northwest, turns north and northeastward well offshore and then out to sea. It doesn't even impact the Canadian maritime. So if this winds up strengthening to about 45 or 50 knots, it'll probably kick up the ocean a little bit for a day or two in the off New England and parts of from the southern areas of the Northeast, northern Mid-Atlantic states. I wouldn't be surprised. Now let me go back to this satellite view, because we do have a strong tropical wave, and you can see it right there. It's pretty well defined, and actually the clouds to the north, the low clouds that are to the north, there's turning. So there's what looks to me like a fairly healthy system in the higher levels of the atmosphere that's kind of tied into this, and it's moving toward the west. So this is a system that the GFS really went a little hog wild with during the overnight. But I think the more important factor may be the fact that the European is actually beginning to show a more active tropical environment going on. So here's the water vapor imagery, which we like to look at for reasons, so we can look at where shear is and drier air. And there's your dry air. Looks like it's shrinking a little bit there. There's also some dry air here. Now, when I say, when dry air gets involved, impede it in a small way, or it can impede it in a moderate way, or it can impede it in a big way. Since we already have a developed tropical depression here, the dry air is probably only going to slow the intensification process some. I would expect this would become a tropical storm, and we'll have Tropical Storm Gert before too long. We'll have to see what happens with this one, but there's a well-defined wave here. So if there's enough going on in the structure of the system, it could fight off some of that dry air, but it may very well wind up slowing down the process of development. But being that all the models last night were kind of bullish with the idea of development, I think it'll probably wind up happening. Now, they only ran a couple of hurricane models with this, and you can see the silliness of the tracks. It's just like these arcs of A, B, and C. So it's kind of useless from a standpoint of a tool. At this point, you only have 3 models here showing, and I think the basic overall trend with this is going to be to track it out to the west. So let's look and see what it does with these tropical systems. I'm going to start with the European today. And so let's backtrack to the initial, which was at 8 p.m. last night, and here are the Cabo Verde Islands. So there's low pressure here. Here's our tropical system, the tropical depression in the east, which it moves north and then turns it northeastward and goodbye. The system here begins to show a little bit of shows a closed circulation on the European by Wednesday evening. You can find it there. That little dot is what it is I'm sorry, it was Wednesday evening, now Thursday evening, Friday evening. Here we have it here. There's another low of some kind. You look at these wind barbs, it actually could pick out the closed circulation or some kind of closed circulation with a second wave coming off the Cabo Verde Islands. And then the European by a week from next Saturday has a closed circulation in the northeastern leewards. It has this broad closed circulation in the central Atlantic. And then moving on to next Monday night and next Tuesday, we have 1, 2, 3 systems here that the European shows up. But it really only gets this up to maybe, it looks like it might be a tropical storm. Maybe this one could be a tropical storm and that one is a tropical depression. It develops some kind of frontal wave here in the northeast. So what is the upper air telling us? Well, we'll switch off to that and get an idea. And we will backtrack to see where how the European evolves. And remember what we were talking about yesterday with respect to the Atlantic ridge and troughing in the east. So you have the trough here in the east. So this tropical depression / tropical storm Gert, assuming it gets there, is pretty much a no-brainer, done deal. I mean, they didn't even run, by the way, when we looked at the track model guidance for this was actually from last night. They didn't even run new spaghetti plots because, it's pretty much straightforward as to what's going to happen with this. But let's go back to the upper air with the European. So the two things to focus on that are going to be the drivers for any other system that comes out of the Atlantic will be the strength of this ridge out in the Atlantic, and also what is the trough situation in the eastern part of the United States when it gets down the road. Well, it seems that the European attempts to at least hold the ridge in place, still here. So your flow is going to be made to the west. And also remember, if these systems are weak, they are going to tend to track further west. If they are more developed, they will probably have more of a northerly component of motion because they will react more to the steering winds in the higher levels of the atmosphere, the more developed that they are higher up, as opposed to when you have these weak systems that are very shallow and they're just basically going to be blown along by the trade winds. All right, so there's your jet stream. We're now at next Friday night. We still have this troughing in the east. The westerlies, the west to east part of the jet stream is from Virginia northward. So you've got this ridge out in the Atlantic kind of holding firm. The European does attempt to weaken this trough. It starts to build a ridge back up from Texas northeastward. You still have the Atlantic ridge here. So the big question is, what do we got in here? Is it, is there going to be a strong enough ridging? And there's a weakness here, but might it be strong enough so that any tropical system will be able to keep a westerly component of motion? And I think that's going to be the big question going forward. The GFS, for what it's worth, and sometimes it's not worth very much, the GFS kind of has the same idea. The problem with the GFS is, once again, it really develops this system far more than the European does, so you get a bit more of a northerly component of motion, and it wants to take a hurricane into the southeast. Now, what the GFS does, which goes past the time frame, because they look fairly similar. If you remember from the European what I just showed you, it looks pretty similar. The GFS has a strong enough ridge here sitting off the Atlantic and extending out into the Gulf states. The system is responding to a weakness between the Atlantic ridge and a ridge that's back through Texas. So there's a bit of a hole in there. The main westerlies now have kind of retreated up a bit further to the north. So it responds to that gap in there and wants to take a storm into South Carolina. You know, again, this could be model fantasy. And then, by the way, by the time after that's all done, as we get toward the end of the month, another deep trough begins to appear in the east. So in terms of the surface, again, all these things in terms of the long range are highly suspect with regards to where models put these things. So please use this with caution and view it with the skepticism that it should be viewed. Now, look at by 12Z Monday. The GFS has a well-developed system south and west of the Cabo Verde Islands. I mean, it's already at least a tropical depression here by tomorrow. So we're going to know in 24 hours whether this model has any value. And you know, it's basically strengthens it to a tropical storm and then a minimal hurricane, much like it did with this system that we are just experiencing now, that only last night became a tropical depression east of the Bahamas. So it actually takes a similar track. This system is taking a similar track as the system that we're just looking at, the depression that's east of the Bahamas. Only the GFS goes crazy with development and brings it actually to a Category 3 hurricane as it nears the Carolinas. You know, please. I think the European may have the better idea on this with signaling increased activity, but keeping the systems relatively weak, or certainly at least not strengthening them into these major hurricanes that the GFS does. And of course the Canadian is going to follow suit. So there it is on the Canadian. We're into Tuesday, and we already have a tropical storm west of the Cabo Verde Islands, which it takes northwestward, just north of Puerto Rico, toward the Bahamas. So actually the tracks of all three models with this are fairly similar. It's a question of how the global models are responding to upper air conditions and whether we're going to see the kind of strengthening that the GFS is showing, or are there going to be weaker systems and displaced further west than the European? That is the solution that I'm going to lean toward, the weaker and further west solutions of the solution of the European with these systems, because that really does pretty much make the most sense. So we'll leave it here with this, and since there's not really too much weather going on, there is a slight risk of severe weather today from North Texas on up into eastern Colorado, western Kansas, on up through much of central Nebraska into southeastern South Dakota. Notice no thunderstorm activity for much of the Northeast except northern New England, and then from the southern Virginia, from most of Virginia on southward to Florida. Bit of a marginal risk in northern Louisiana and southeast Arkansas, western Mississippi, and the general area of thunderstorms goes up through the Rockies. And just leaving you with the East Coast, the satellite perspective, you know, we've got that dry air moving in here, so some really nice weather coming into the Northeast. Humidity is reasonable. Temperatures are warm, but not crazy, not hot by any means. And we have our tropical depression that could become Tropical Storm Gert either late this afternoon, or more than likely what the Hurricane Center likes to do, or it seems like because it's happened to me 3 times already, that as soon as this video is done, they upgrade it to a tropical storm in between their time frames. So let's chat for a little bit, and we'll take all your questions. And so hang on one second while I set it up. Let's chat for a little bit, and we'll take all your questions. And so hang on one second while I set it up. Okay, so you should have me here. Hang on. Let's chat for a little bit, and we'll take your questions. Okay, so I'm glad everybody is here. I hope everybody's had a great morning. Okay, so, I'm relaxing, and I'm also hoping that the sun doesn't get in the way with starting to block my vision a bit here. Anyhow, it's really beautiful out. We've got blue skies. There's a couple of little clouds here and there from where I am. I hope you're enjoying a great day. Let's just go over a couple of things. First of all, I think going forward, we're probably going to see these models do things with these tropical systems going down in the next couple of weeks. Let's remember that at least from the standpoint of beyond the fifth day, what's happening here? Whoops. I have an extra audio feed opened up, so hang on. Let's remember that at least from the standpoint of beyond the fifth day. My fault. Okay, had the audio still on. There's a delay of about 10 seconds from the stream to me, and you there's a little bit of an overlap, so that's why that happens. And I didn't shut the audio down completely on the stream page, so now it's shut down. Okay, so as I was saying, let's remember that as we go out in the long range on the models here beyond the fifth day, that we're going to see probably some interesting things going forward, and maybe we won't. Maybe we will see what's happened before, which is that the GFS puts out a developed system deep into the long range, and then it loses it. I think the significant development from the overnight model runs is the fact that the European actually does have signatures of these tropical systems moving across, and it does do something with the lead system, although it doesn't do it anywhere near at the depth of the GFS. So the tropics look like they're starting to juice up a little bit. It may have to do with the fact that there's been a ridge of high pressure over the Sahara, and that usually is problematic for tropical storm development, but it appears that that ridge is breaking down, so that will start to cut off some of the dry air that comes eastward and moves out into the open waters of the Atlantic. So that could be, that's a new development in the upper air that we're going to pay attention to in terms of the tropical storm activity in the Atlantic. And of course, as each day passes, we get deeper and deeper into the season. We're coming into the climatological time where things are supposed to pick up anyway, which it seems to be doing. And so far, the hurricane season has pretty much behaved like clockwork, except for the fact that it has produced a number of small tropical storms, but they've all been relatively weak. We've had the one hurricane which came with Franklin last week, which happened right at the date that you usually see your first hurricane on the map. Is this August going to be warmer than average or cooler than average by your prediction and patterns? This is Alvaro Bonilla. I don't know where you're located, so I'm going to just speak for my own area. I haven't looked at the stats elsewhere, but at least for my own area, it seems to be coming in around average. And in fact, last August was a very warm August. It was almost 4 degrees. It was over 4 degrees above average here. So we are having a cooler August this year, certainly than we were last year. And the overall summer is playing out, at least in the New York City area, at or a little bit above average. Those high 90-degree days in June and July kind of skewed the numbers slightly, and all numbers count. But those 90-degree days came 3 in a row. We had those 3-day bursts, the 3-day burst in June, and I think it was a 4-day burst in July, and that's really been it. We haven't had sort of the 1 and 2 day 90-degree days popping up every week or so. Instead, we got them in those 2 small bunches, and that's been it. So the rest of the time, the temperatures have been relatively reasonable. Which place looks better for the eclipse, Nashville or Kansas City? Jeffrey. Okay, right now, if I had to bet, based on climatology, I would probably lean more toward Kansas City than Nashville, if only because of the fact that Nashville is in that part of the country that usually gets impacted by tropical moisture and the Bermuda High this time of year, and that would at the very least suggest that there will be some cloud issues. And remember, it only takes one cloud. So, you know, you want to go someplace where it is a fairly good chance that there'll be no cloud development at all. And that would be west of the Mississippi, and particularly as you get west of, say, Kansas City, that line, the Kansas City, Missouri border. If you draw a straight line along that longitude and go west from there and just stay away from the Pacific Northwest, you have a lot of areas that you can pick from in terms of getting experiencing the totality. As far as, by the way, someone mentioned too, the live stream tonight. I will do one tonight, but expect it to be 10 o'clock or later because I'm going fishing like this afternoon, and I'll try and do it as close to the issuance of the National Hurricane Center's 11 o'clock advisory with regards to this tropical depression, or maybe by then it will be Tropical Storm Gert. As far as our weather is concerned this week, here in the Northeast and the northern mid-Atlantic states, it looks fairly uneventful until about Thursday, when the next warm front, cold front combination arrive, and at that point we could see some, some showers and thunderstorms later Thursday night, and Friday. But overall, to me, it looks like a fairly quiet week ahead, which is nice. A peace and quiet is usually a good thing. And after that, we'll work our way through next weekend, which, if things play according to the way the pattern has been, weather conditions may improve as we move through the weekend. And then, of course, we come into Monday with the eclipse. New York City getting at about 75%. Check out that website. I'll put the link up here at the bottom of the chat when it's done for more information with regards to that. Also, let me just say a big thank you, as always, to Levi Cowan, who operates Tropical Tidbits. That's tropicaltidbits.com. He also has a YouTube channel, and you should take a look at that as well. He's very good. If you're really into the tropical weather, when these tropical systems get active, he lends a very, very good, it's a technical perspective, but you can learn a lot from him, and I certainly have. So it's tropicaltidbits.com, and I'll put up his YouTube channel on the chat here, on the chat board, so you can link to it. So let's leave it at that because it's so nice out. We don't want to miss out on what is a great day. So enjoy the rest of your day. We'll live stream. Figure maybe about 10:30. I'll start it, and 10:30 Eastern time. And we will see what happens later today with Gert. We'll have a full rundown of the afternoon models, including the European. So we'll see whether it follows its overnight production of producing tropical systems, and whether it's less robust than the GFS, which I think makes the most sense. With these things, you kind of have to sort of wait for them to get underway to get a feel for where they're going, and use your past experience with what we've seen so far in trying to make a good forecast. And for now, I would I'd certainly lean away from the overdeveloped GFS and Canadian models and go with the less developed European model in terms of what it's showing. But all three models do have the general idea of the flavor of the upper air and how these systems are going to track. So that's at least encouraging from a forecast standpoint, because it does give you a bit more confidence going forward in what you think may happen. All right, folks, have a great day, and we will see you tonight at about 10:30.